Don't answer the phone. That was the last thing the old-timer said to me as he handed me the keys to the rundown dive bar. Why not? I'd asked, staring at the cordless telephone just behind the bar. Even in this day and age, most joints still had landlines, especially if they were in the middle of nowhere, like this one, where cell phone reception was patchy at best. Not that one, you dummy, that one. I followed his gnarled finger to the far wall, between the door to the men's room and the arcade machine. On it was mounted a vintage, green, rotary dial phone that even from here looked dead as disco, and probably belonged in the Smithsonian. At first I thought he was yanking my chain. I could see the phone cord was cut, its wires splayed like a rat had chewed through them. Yet the old man's face looked like he'd never so much as cracked a smile, let alone a joke. That thing? But it's not even connected. He scoffed at that. You'll see soon enough. Sayonara, sonny boy. And with that, he quite literally drove off into the sunset. Looking back now, I wished I could have joined him. He was right, of course. Barely 2 days into me owning the joint, that dead-ass phone rang. It was midday, and we hadn't even got the place up and running yet. Crates of alcohol lay behind the bar, ready to restock the shelves. The stools and tables were all shunted to one side, so we could give the place a deep clean, and I'd only just managed to hire a bartender and a part-time chef. The chef hadn't managed to arrange last-minute childcare, so their 6-year-old daughter had come along to help out, which seemed to involve testing out the old jukebox and munching on an ice pop. I didn't mind, as she wasn't getting in the way, and looked as cute as a button, pigtails swinging as she danced along to the beat. However, I missed the sound of the old rotary ringing over the jukebox when I popped out back to grab another box of fresh shaker pint glasses. The girl must have thought it was her chance to play house for real, as when I came back a few seconds later, I saw her on the phone, her little head nodding intently as she listened to someone, or something, on the other end. Hey, kid, I called out, meaning to ask her who it was. The girl ignored me, transfixed. I nudged the jukebox off with my elbow and set the box of glasses down beside it. Uh-huh, the girl continued on the phone, ice pop dribbling down her other hand. I walked over, not exactly in a rush to snatch the phone away from her, just mostly curious as to who was calling. I'd practically forgotten about the old man's warning in the busyness of the days since, but that'd soon change. As I reached her, she murmured, "I've got to go now?" Only it sounded more like a question than someone trying to get off the phone. "Who's that?" I asked, as she stretched up on her tiptoes to put the handset back in its cradle. "No one, mister." "Then who were you speaking to?" "Mr. No One." She giggled and skipped off towards the front door. "Hey, wait up! I've got to go now," she shouted back, sounding like she was still on the phone. "Your mom said to stay inside." She ignored me, opened the door to the bar, and slipped out into the blazing sunshine. I swore and darted over to the kitchen. I poked my head inside the door to tell the chef her daughter had just gone AWOL, when the unmistakable sound of screeching tires, brakes and broken glass rang out. At the time, we thought the driver of the car must have lost control and accidentally hit the poor girl. After all, how else would she end up through their windscreen? It wasn't until the police released a statement, and I remembered we'd found the car stopped firmly in its lane, tires still smoking, when it was revealed the girl had skipped right out onto the road and into the oncoming vehicle. Miraculously, the girl survived, but ended up in a coma, and still is for all I know. The chef understandably left after that, and I had to hire a new one. A freak accident, the local press had called it. Of course, I had no way of knowing for sure if whoever the girl had spoken to on the other end of the phone had told her to go play with the traffic. But it seemed like a mighty big coincidence that as soon as she'd hung up, she'd lost all interest in her ice pop and the jukebox, and had decided to skip out into the road instead. After that, I taped up the old phone and slapped an out-of-order sign on it. At the time, I thought that'd be enough, and for a while it was. A month later, some arsehole had blocked up the men's toilet with enough loo roll to plug the Hudson, and I'd just managed to unblock it when I came out of the men's to find a grizzled biker with the old phone to their ear. Their beard was bushy and greying, and their tanned skin as leathered as their get-up. They looked like they'd spent half their life on their bike and had seen it all. Yet whatever they were hearing on the other end of the line had sent their face as white as the toilet I'd just unblocked. "Hey, can't you read?" I said, pointing to my makeshift sign. "It's out of order." It seemed to take a moment for them to notice me standing there, still wearing the bright yellow rubber gloves. "No, it ain't. It just rang." "Then hang up," I said, getting worried now. "No, it's my ma." For all I knew, I could have been the biker's mother on the other end. But after what had happened to that little girl, I wasn't taking any chances. If he wanted to call his ma, he could do it on the payphone down the road. I made a move to press down on the receiver and end the call, but the biker snatched my hand back, eyes like fire. "Ow, okay," I hissed, the fight falling out of me as I felt him threaten to break my fingers. "Let me go, damn it." Eventually, his grip slackened, and his eyes became spaced out again as he focused on the voice on the other end of the line. I stepped back, massaging the feeling back into my fingers, but didn't walk away. The voice on the other end didn't sound like a woman's. Sure, I was hearing it secondhand, through the beard of some hairy-assed biker, and couldn't make out any actual words, but it sounded deep and distorted. I paced nearby, anxious for the biker's safety and for the call to end. The bartender flashed me curious glances between serving drinks, probably because they were the only other person sober enough to sense the standoff between me and the biker. Eventually, the biker hung up and didn't even spare me a glance as he staggered straight for the door, not even bothering to finish his beer. Fearing a repeat of last time, I followed him outside. "Hey, mister, would you like me to call you a cab?" I called after him as he made a beeline towards his bike. He ignored me, and I ran over, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sir, you're not safe to drive," I said, hoping he wasn't about to crush my hand again. Instead, he shrugged me off and spat. "I ain't been drinking." I saw the sudden sharpness in his eyes, remembered the full glass he'd left behind, and realized he wasn't staggering because he was drunk, but because of whatever he'd just heard on that phone line. "Where are you going?" I asked as he gunned the motorbike. "To see my ma," he grunted, before taking off in a flurry of road dust. I watched him drive off into the night, half expecting to see his taillight suddenly veer off into the ditch or get T-boned by an oncoming semi, but he was fine. Eventually he disappeared from view, and I went back inside, wondering if whatever curse that old rotary had cast over the joint had ended with that poor girl. It wasn't until the following afternoon, when the biker's wife dropped in and asked if I'd seen him today, that I realized how naive I'd been. Apparently, the biker had made it home last night, but had set off for the cemetery first thing, only stopping for flowers from the gas station. "Cemetery?" I asked. When I'd seen him drive off last night, he said he was going to see his mother. "Well, yeah, she passed last year and was buried just down the road from here." "En route redacted?" "Yeah, but I visited the cemetery and every joint between here and our trailer and I can't find him. You were my last stop, and if he ain't here, then—" She started to tear up, and I tried my best to reassure her husband had probably just gone for a long drive to clear his head. I'd just poured her a drink on the house when the old rotary rang again. We were the only two people in the bar at the time. "Are you going to get that?" she asked after the fourth ring. I threw her a smile which felt more like a grimace. "Whoever they are, they'll call back." "What if it's my husband?" she said, getting to her feet. I clamped a hand over hers on the bar, holding it in place. "Ma'am, that's a private line. If your husband was calling, it'd come through to this phone instead," I said, picking up the cordless behind me and offering it to her. "Now, would you like to give him another call?" The old rotary abruptly cut off mid-ring, but she didn't seem to notice. She bobbed her head once and tried her husband on the cordless. He didn't pick up. I imagine she tried many more times that evening after she finished her drink and eventually left, disappearing into the crowd of regulars. Next time I saw her was in the local paper, pleading for people to come forward with any info on her husband that had somehow vanished in broad daylight, riding a 2-track road. No one had any answers for her, just as how no one could explain how the guy had spent the better part of 20 minutes apparently on the phone to his dead ma. I put an ad in the same paper a week later for a waitress to help work weekends at the bar, not knowing I'd eventually end up hiring the phone's next victim, who I'll call Eden. She was not long out of high school and was trying to make it as the lead singer in some local grunge rock band. Eden told me all this in her interview, and I didn't care too much either way. As long as she turned up for shift on time, she could host open mic nights here in the week if she wanted. Inevitably, the old Rotary had other plans for her. After the biker, I'd tried taking the damn thing off the wall, but it wouldn't budge an inch. So instead, I'd taken a pair of cable cutters to its handset cord. They'd sliced through the soft green plastic as easy as pie, but cutting through the wire had felt like trying to slice steel rebar with a pair of scissors, so eventually I gave up. I figured the sizable notch I'd made would be enough to at least stop anyone from hearing whatever was on the other end. I regret that now. I should have taken a chainsaw to the thing. Halfway through Eden's 6th shift at the bar, the disconnected phone rang again. I'd been in the small office, out back at the time, so hadn't heard it ringing, but I did hear her shouting my name. She had one hell of a set of lungs on her. I'll give her that, if only her recall was just as good. I'd told Eden not to answer the old Rotary under any circumstances during her training, yet she must have forgotten in the weeks since, or was just trying to be helpful. Either way, no matter how much warning tape I slapped on that evil thing, it seemed to prey on the fact that humans just can't resist the urge to answer a ringing phone. Perhaps it speaks to some deep desire for connection we all have hardwired inside of us, even if whatever connection Eden made with the thing on the other end seemed entirely innocent at first. I raced out of the office at the sound of her shouting my name, thinking a delivery had arrived. It wasn't until I reached the bar and saw her holding the old phone, face backlit by the arcade machine, that I broke out in a cold sweat. "It's for you," she said, offering me the phone. "Hang up." The 2 men leaning on the bar turned to look at me, sensing the fear in my voice. Eden just gawped, though, not comprehending why I wouldn't take the old phone from her. "Hang it up now!" "Geez," she said, finally relenting. "Okay, chill." She hung up, and I felt my heart restart. "My office now," I said, sensing I'd already caused too much of a scene. I threw the bartender a scowl as we passed, wondering how they'd let her answer that phone. They knew it was cursed, or at least pretended to indulge my theory. They shrugged apologetically. "I didn't hear it ringing, I swear." Eden looked sheepish as she sat down opposite my makeshift desk, and I started to grill her. "Who was that calling for me just now?" "I don't know, they didn't leave a name." "Okay, but what did they sound like? A man or woman?" "Neither. Their voice was all mushy." "You mean distorted?" "No. Like if you take a vinyl record and slow it down on the deck." "So deep and slow?" "Kind of. And what did they say exactly?" "They asked if the owner was there. I said yes, and they asked if they could speak with you." "Did you hear anything in the background?" "I don't know, a cracking sound, like a bonfire." I swallowed a lump in my throat, feeling like a target had been painted on my back. Who was the thing that kept calling, and what did they want with me? "I don't feel so great." "Is it okay if I take the rest of the night off?" Eden asked, breaking my trance. "Sure. You going to be okay driving home?" "It's raining cats and dogs out there." "Yeah, I only live 5 minutes away." "Okay, text me when you get there." Predictably, half an hour passed, and she didn't text. But she looked to be online, which was the next best thing. So I figured Eden had just gotten sucked into the wormhole of social media, but was home safe and sound. No harm done. I made a mental note to call her in the morning in case she felt a sudden need to start writing route redacted and vanish off the face of the earth, like the biker had. But until then, I had a bar to close and a demonic phone to tend to. Last call came and went, and I ushered the lingering drunks out of my bar and waved the bartender off. Just as I was about to lock the front door, the old rotary rang, making me jump. I turned to face the damn thing, feeling like it had been waiting to be alone with me this whole shift. "Oh, hell no," I muttered, stomping over to it. I snatched the handset off the cradle and treated it like a snake as I kept it as far away from my head as possible and slammed it back down on the receiver, ending the call. I left it hanging off the hook, hoping that was the end of it. I was about to start cleaning up when my ears picked up a low whisper. I frowned at the toilets, thinking I'd forgotten someone was still in there, but no, there was no bar of light seeping under the door. It took me a solid second to realize the low, static hiss was coming from the dangling handset instead. The line was cut, and I'd ended whatever phantom call had came through, yet the evil thing was still trying to talk to me. "Screw this," I said, darting over to the jukebox, hoping to drown out the phantom caller. I'd just started to punch in the code to my favorite jam when I heard the front door to the bar open and looked up to see Eden saunter in. She was soaked head to foot, pink hair hanging in lank strings across her face. "Hey, you forget something?" I asked, wondering what the hell she was doing back here after I'd sent her home hours ago. She stood there, dripping, staring at the far wall as I walked over to her. She smelt awful. "Are you okay?" It was at that moment the old rotary rang again. My heart skipped a beat and I glanced back to see the phone still hanging where I'd left it. It was impossible. It was literally off the freaking hook. "It's for you," Eden said eerily. I turned to face her, but her eyes were still fixed on the phone. "I'm not answering that thing," I said. Something clicked in her hand, punctuating the gaps between the dead phone's rings. I glanced down to see her lighter and realized what she smelt of. She wasn't drenched in rain, but gasoline. "Whoa," I said, backing up. She pointed a dripping finger to the phone. It was still ringing, demanding my attention. Okay. I edged towards the phone, wondering if there was a way I could maybe lock myself in the toilet and escape through the window. But that'd mean leaving her here, possessed by whatever was on the other end of that phone. I couldn't do that to Eden. I had a responsibility to her. Feeling scared beyond belief, I took a deep breath to calm myself, picked up the ringing phone, and slowly raised it to my ear. "Hello," I whispered, praying it was a dead line. It wasn't. I heard a faint crackling in the background like a roaring fire. "Hello?" a voice replied. At first, I thought it was an echo. "Hello," I repeated, eyes darting back to Eden. She hadn't moved an inch. "Hell. Ooh," the thing said, sounding like it was melting now. "Who's this? Where are you?" "Hell. Oh!" A crowd of voices screamed in my ear, threatening to deafen me. Terrified, and feeling like my head was about to explode, I let the phone drop like a hot coal. The handset swung into the wall on the cord, but I could still make out the faint screams on the other end. "It's for you," Eden said again. My head whipped back to her just as she ignited the lighter in her hand. "No, wait," I begged, but it was too late. She was drenched in the stuff and went up like a dry rag. "Holy shit!" I dove over to the bar and grabbed the fire extinguisher to start hosing her down, yet by the time I reached her, the fire had spread, lighting a hellish trail all the way from her to the front door where she'd dripped in the gasoline. I sprayed her with the extinguisher, but I could already see her skin starting to melt. I didn't know what was eerier, the fact she was just standing there, or that the only screams in the bar were the ones coming from that freaking phone. The extinguisher ran out before I could cover her in foam, let alone the flames fanning out across the floor. I knew I should have bought a bigger one. I grabbed at her arm and pulled her towards me, away from the flames. I felt her skin sloughing off in my hands as her knees finally buckled. "No!" I cried, urging her to get up, but it was no use. As the flames crept up her pant legs again, I grabbed my jacket off and threw it over Eden. The smoke stung my eyes as I tried desperately to smother the flames, but it was no use. My hands burned and I couldn't catch my breath. I felt for a pulse in the mess of melting flesh, but there was none. Eden was gone. Horrid laughter echoed from the dangling handset behind me as I dragged myself backwards. The flames raged stronger now, covering the space between me and the front door. I knew I had to get out before they reached the spirits behind the bar, and the whole place went up in a ball of flame. Feeling faint and like a coward for leaving Eden's body to burn, I slipped through the door to the men's room and staggered over to the window. It could slide up, but not enough to climb out through without breaking it. I shattered it with my elbow and slid out, gouging my sides on the broken shards and adding to my list of injuries. By the time I limped over to the payphone down the road, the dive bar was an inferno on the horizon. 911, what's your emergency? Fire, I croaked. There's been a fire. A crackling sound filled the air. I looked up, worried the flames had blown over to the next building, but they hadn't. It was coming from the other end of the line. I know. Did you like it? It's for you. Eden? Why did you leave me? It's so cold down here. I hung up and wept. Someone else must have called the fire department because they arrived half an hour later to put out the flames. I escaped with second-degree burns to my hands and arms, but Eden died that night, all because some cursed phone had turned her into an arsonist. I've been advised I should be able to claim insurance and have the place back up and running within the year. But I don't think I want to. One person is dead, one is missing, presumed dead, and a child is in a coma, not to mention the countless other people that probably suffered before I took over the joint. I tried giving the old guy I bought it off a call, but his number's no longer recognized. He's gone off the grid and stitched me up real good. Maybe that's the only way to escape for real, to pass on the curse. I was going to mention the route name as a warning to whoever's reading this, but decided to redact it in the end, as some fool's bound to come looking for the phone for the wrong reasons. It's my cross to bear now, and it's been feeling so damn heavy ever since my bar burned down. I'm posting this from a cabin in the middle of nowhere. I can hear a phone ringing in the next room and it won't stop. I picked this cabin because it doesn't have a damn landline, and my cell's been switched off all week. But I know if I walk next door right now, I'll find that old green rotary ringing by the fireplace. I'm tired of running. Should I answer it again?